Everyone has a game that they love. Some people have games that not many people know about, and some people have love for games that are generally considered bad.
Hey friends, I'm Pragmatik, and I, like many, like to talk about video games. And the game I want to talk about today is Quest 64. A game that many consider unplayable, but I don't really see it that way. So let's get into it!
Quest 64 was developed by Imagineer and published by THQ. First announced at Space World 1997, this game was a cause of a lot of hype, being the first RPG for the N64 even after 2 years of its lifespan. This game went by Holy Magic Century in Europe and L-Tel Monsters in Japan, which are both much better names than Quest, by the way. You play as Brian, a young magician apprentice whose journey is to find his missing father, who went to pursue the missing L-Tel book. His father's disappearance has met with a greater appearance of monsters, which means Brian's journey will be filled with battles and great risk. Brian's adventure will take him from town to town as he tries to find his father. He will soon become aware of greater difficulties in the world, as important items that hold the world balanced together have been stolen. And that's about all the plot you'll get. Upon leaving your town, you'll immediately be subjected to random battle encounters. This is where you'll get a good taste of the combat. Brian can fight within a certain space. You'll have to think tactfully if you want to hit your opponents, as certain spells attack enemies in certain ways. You control wind, fire, water, and earth. Your enemies also attack with these elements, mirroring versions of your own attacks, something we'll get into later. Magic will be your main way of attacking, being a magician and everything. Brian can level up his spells by winning battles or by finding these little spirits hidden throughout the world. Leveling them up will allow you to use more powerful spells, which kind of equates to a variation of the original attack and just a bigger version of it. Or you could just do this! It doesn't take long to feel a spike in the difficulty. Really, entering the first big area could see you dying immediately, and there's a pretty dumb reason why. This game has a way of tossing some RPG tropes to the side and embracing a lot of overdone tropes. Leveling in the traditional sense won't be found in this game. Rather, using magic and attacking can increase your strength, but if you want to increase agility, you'll have to physically run around the map. This can help to avoid attacks from enemies. In order to increase defense, you have to actually take damage, so grinding your agility could be really problematic if it's done so excessively that you can't take any damage. And don't get me wrong, I usually praise the alternative thinking to leveling up in a game, but this one doesn't really work. Taking damage to increase defense and spamming magic to increase the might of your magic would be great if the game didn't take so long to actually level up. This makes the process much longer than just traditional leveling, but grinding in these ways could have been fun if the stronger enemies gave more of a reward to leveling up Brian. An aspect I do like is the ability to deal with magic in real time. When an enemy casts a spell, you can move Brian to help him avoid it. Another trope Quest deals away with is money and shops in general. Everything is free in this game. You can get free bread that heals your health, dewdrops to recover magic, and inns are free to sleep in. I like to think it's because of Brian's social status of an apprentice magician that lands him these perks. I actually like the idea of everything being free, as it does away with money grinding. But I do find it funny that Brian's healing items are mostly bread. Kid loves his carbs. But the RPG trope the game seems to really embrace is the journey to collect elemental orbs. Brian will go to each town and find that the area's precious orb has been stolen. This will send you out to recover it, which the leader of each town will just kind of let you keep. I can kind of forgive Quest using this trope since the game is based heavily on magic.
And at this point, Quest 64 is a pretty solid game. There's just so many extra aspects that work against it.
The biggest enemy you'll face in this game is the camera. The camera will fight you every step of the way when it comes to tight spaces, which there are a lot of. Each town is pretty tightly enclosed, and trying to see where you're going can be such a chore. You can use the B button to try and straighten it, but even this rarely fixes anything. Add on to that, exploring can sometimes be useless. Nearly every RPG is guilty of adding areas and towns that are basically empty, but Quest 64 takes it to a whole nother level. It's like they wanted to make every place feel big and expansive, but instead rather just kind of annoyed you with how many useless empty rooms they make you go into. Despite how much this game depends on leveling up your elements, it's almost too much of a chore to level up all four. It's more beneficial to just focus on 2 of them and level up the others from time to time to give them some semblance of worth. One of them should most definitely be water, as it's the only spell that grants you healing abilities and you'll need those. It also helps to give you one of the most game-breaking abilities in Quest 64, the Magic Barrier. Remember how I said that all your enemies use variations of your own magic? Well, I meant it, and having Magic Barrier basically nullifies any damage you'd receive from an enemy, which pretty much takes a 180 from the battle being so annoyingly difficult, but I'd consider it a reward for sticking through so long the game's rough leveling system. The plot is bad. Pretty much everything I've told you in this review is the entirety of what's in Quest 64. Only until near the end of the game does the story ever really flesh out, and it's only slightly, trust me. Sure, there's some story here and there about the Eltel book bringing catastrophic events if not recovered and kept safe, and the orbs do have their purpose. The game goes to say that any element becoming stronger than any other could upset the balance. But other than that, the plot is so very, very thin. There are a lot of things I love about Quest, like how pretty the game can look at times, especially for a game on the N64. I love Brian's design, even that silly little piece of hair that sticks up for all eternity. And the music is one of the best aspects. I've always remembered the monastery theme in Melroad, even after years of not playing the game. The battle theme sounds a little too familiar though. I really like Quest 64, but I don't think people calling it a bad game is unwarranted. Quest 64 brought a lot of different ideas to the RPG formula, but it failed to really perfect any of them. Avoiding magic attacks should have been further developed, the leveling system needs a ton of work, and in the case of plot, there really isn't any. Especially nothing new, despite having such a nice little premise to work with. But Quest isn't unplayable and can certainly be enjoyed. I love the idea of walking from town to town like you really are on this grand adventure, and Brian doing it alone reminds me a lot of the first Dragon Quest where you only had your one character. And at times it does feel like the developers actually tried, adding a unique theme to each town and even a day and night cycle that goes throughout the game. Even the journey from one area to the next was so massive and fun to explore. But the game, much like the world you travel, is just too empty at times. It really does take an acquired taste to appreciate this game, and a lot of patience.
And this is about where I'd end the video, if there weren't 2 games worth mentioning that came out after Quest 64. Quest Fantasy Puzzle Challenge, and more importantly, Quest Brian's Journey.
Fantasy Challenge could be best described as a clone of Dig Dug, but with magic. Brian enters each level trying to make these chests fall and break open. Sometimes they contain power-ups that can allow Brian to use a magic attack on his pursuers, and sometimes they contain one of the elements. If it's the latter, then the level immediately ends and you progress to the next stage with an image of Brian saying, "Cool." Getting enough of these random crystals will allow Brian to attack as well, but I find it easier to just rush and use the chest to defeat the enemies. Beyond this, there isn't much to say about it. It's definitely a fun little game to waste a few hours with, but nothing that expands upon the Quest universe. That good enough for you? Cool! The importance of Quest Brian's Journey is a different matter entirely. This game has you searching for Brian's father as he has gone missing during his journey to recover the Eltel book. Now Brian must journey to find his father. Does this sound kind of familiar to you? Good, because it's the exact same game as Quest 64. Quest Brian's Journey is what's known as a demake, a remade game converted for an older platform. This example being stripping Quest 3D exterior and substituting a classic RPG design. And this is what Quest 64 really needed. Nearly every part of this game is an exact replica of Quest 64, from its dialogue to the location of the spirits and even to the location of the chest. I didn't have a problem finding the chest in Donner Castle because I remembered that they were in the rooms beside the king's throne. That's exactly how one-to-one this game is. I do say nearly exact because there are minor changes, the most notable being some changes to the story. Changes that definitely make the storytelling more interesting. The story this time around is more than just the king asking you to get his orb back. Rather, his daughter is kidnapped by the first boss and you're on a mission to rescue her. It's worth noting that the king's daughter is in Quest 64, but in that part of the game she just commands you to get the orb like her father did. That's literally it. And as a player, I'm way more invested to rescue a princess than I am to get an orb 4 times in a row. The battles play out the same, with Brian being able to avoid attacks if he positions himself in the right area. but more importantly, the grinding and progression feels so much better. To get from Melroad to the First Kingdom in Quest 64 can take anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes given exploration and encounter rates, but with Brian's Quest you could easily make it in 10. Doing away with the excessive fights that do little to progress Brian's level, shoddy camera angles, and expansive journeys serves to make this game flow much better. The curve in difficulty is still present, but the focus on leveling your magic abilities is way more generous. I think this is a lot of what Quest 64 should have been. Stripping away all this rushed fluff is definitely a plus for the game. Don't get me wrong, I love Quest 64, but Brian's journey is paced and formatted to a level that most anyone can enjoy. If Quest interests you even in the slightest, I would strongly recommend looking into this version as well, especially if you're a lover of the more traditional RPG. Brian's journey still doesn't have the best story, as the plot is generally the same, but the extra little ways of storytelling go a long way. I hope you'll set out on an adventure with our young magician apprentice, whether it be in the 2D or 3D spectrum. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video. Did you play Quest 64? Have you ever heard of Brian's journey? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Also hit that bell. And as always, keep it practical.